Before we begin, I want to start off by expressing the condolences of this committee to the people of the great state of Texas who have been devastated by recent tragic flooding. I know this hits especially hard to the home of several of our colleagues who call Texas home. Our thoughts and our prayers are with the victim of this flooding and their families. We are grateful for the courageous efforts of the Coast Guard, CBP, and many other first responders and volunteers who have placed themselves in harm's way to rescue those caught in the flooding. These American heroes, like Coast Guard swimmer Scott Ruskin, saved countless lives through their bravery, and they deserve our nation's gratitude and honor. This committee will continue to do everything we can to ensure the victims receive the assistance they need and that the federal agencies are prepared to help in times of trouble. The purpose of today's hearing is to examine the role that taxpayer-supported non-governmental agencies played in facilitating the border crisis under the Biden-Harris administration. I now recognize myself for a brief opening statement. For 4 years, the Biden-Harris administration created the worst border crisis in American history. From day one, Biden, Harris, and the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas implemented a policy of mass catch and release, dismantling effective border policies, and gutted interior enforcement. As a result, roughly 13 million inadmissible aliens were either encountered at our border or entered as gotaways. The consequences of these acts have been devastating. Thousands of Americans were lost to fentanyl poisoning. Gang members wreaked havoc in local communities. Young women like Laken Riley, Joycelyn Nungrara, and Rachel Moran were raped, abused, and murdered at the hands of illegal aliens. This committee led the way by impeaching Secretary Mayorkas for his willful and systematic refusal to enforce long-standing immigration laws passed and amended over the years by bipartisan majorities in Congress. The American people also emphatically rejected the open border policies at the ballot box last November. What is not known by many, and what will be highlighted today at this hearing, is that the Biden-Harris administration could not have executed an open-door border policy on its own. They needed help, and that help came from non-governmental agencies funded by the federal government. These groups that received billions in taxpayer funding would prove instrumental in helping the Biden-Harris administration process and release a historic number of illegal aliens into our country. Under a DHS program called the Emergency Food and Shelter Humanitarian Program, EFSPH, which later became the Shelter and Service Program, FEMA provided grants to numerous NGOs, many of whom are operating at the southwest border. These groups spent billions of taxpayers' dollars giving to them by the Biden-Harris administration to provide all types of benefits to illegal aliens, those individuals who were recently released from DHS custody. Our taxpayer dollars were spent on purchasing tens of thousands of nights in hotel rooms for illegal aliens, instead of using existing ICE detention facilities to house those detained individuals. The Biden-Harris administration sent taxpayer dollars to NGOs to put them in hotels at the cost, again, of hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of those contracts, in many cases without any ICE supervision. Even worse, our taxpayer dollars were used to form the final link in the cartel's human smuggling operation, paying to help illegal aliens travel to their preferred destinations. Chicago, New York, Miami, Los Angeles, or other destinations of choice. Jansen Owen, then the chief of the Border Patrol Del Rio sector, told the committee in an official interview, ICE would then turn over illegal aliens over to NGOs for them to travel to wherever they were going to go while awaiting their hearing. Recent studies have shown that illegal aliens who passed through the doors of these NGOs at the border ended up in effectively every congressional district across the country. Many of the NGOs served as a launching pad for mass illegal immigration. The abuse was so widespread that even the Biden-Harris administration, the NGOs themselves, couldn't deny what was happening. In June 2022, when DHS officials said that the department will continue to closely coordinate with and support NGOs to facilitate the movement of any individual encountered at the southwest border. John Martin with the Opportunity Center for the Homelessness, an NGO in El Paso, said that his organization works with illegal aliens to, quote, facilitate travel to destinations of their choice, end quote. These actions appear to many on the committee to constitute a violation of Section 274 of the Immigration and Nationalization Act, which prohibits any individual from encouraging or inducing someone to enter the country unlawfully or helping transport them to the interior. Corruption and waste were rampant in the spending by the NGOs. Under the Biden-Harris administration, DHS's top watchdog audited millions of dollars that had gone to local grant recipients over a 6-month period in 2021. They found that a lack of documentation kept them from determining how more than half the money had been spent. In some cases, they discovered that funds had been used to pay for benefits for individuals who were legally inadmissible to receive them. The Biden border crisis provided to be a profitable business for some NGOs. According to the Free Press, 3 large NGOs involved in handling unaccompanied alien children, the Global Refuge, who received 85% of its revenue from governmental grants, Endeavors, who received 97% of their revenue from governmental grants, and Southwest Keys Program, who received an astonishing 99% of its revenue from the federal government. These 3 groups saw their combined revenue grow to an astonishing $2 billion plus by 2022. I would argue that these groups had a vested interest in prolonging the crisis. One NGO, Southwest Key Properties, used the increase in government funding to raise salaries of officers and officials across the board, including, according to recent media reporting, an increase of over $675,000 increase to their CEO. Many NGOs tried to mislead the public in how these funds were being allocated. This was documented by a recent Florida grand jury investigation that just said that in that investigation, the grand jury said that they were actively obstructing. They were obstructed from determining how these federal dollars were spent. The grand jury also noted that some NGOs received the vast majority of their federal funding from grants, or the vast majority of their funding from federal grants. Pretty interesting for groups that like to call themselves non-governmental organizations. The American people are tired of being told that we should fund the actions of lawbreakers. They are tired of groups encouraging people to cross the border illegally and organizations that facilitate the release of illegal aliens into the interior. When would-be border crossers know that they will receive a host of benefits that await them immediately after crossing the border, they are more likely to make the deadly and dangerous journey. That's exactly what happened under the Biden-Harris watch, as millions of vulnerable people put themselves in harm's way at the hands of cartels and smuggling groups. An untold number perished along the route. Tens of thousands of more suffered physical and sexual abuse on the way, and many are still trapped today, paying off their cartel debt through forced labor or working in the sex trade. We can and should look for ways to care for the vulnerable and less fortunate, but using taxpayer dollars to undermine our laws and the well-being of Americans and migrants alike is not the way to do it. We cannot let taxpayer dollars be used to facilitate lawbreaking and we must shine a light on this disgraceful step as we begin to hold these organizations accountable. This cannot, on our watch, ever be allowed to happen again. 5 minutes of questioning. I want to respond to some of the allegations contained in the ranking member's opening statement. And Mr. Thompson, I'm assuming that you didn't write that statement because you have known me for some period of time. I know you to be someone who that I have a long-standing relationship with, and do not believe that you would write an opening statement attacking mine or the Christianity of any other member of this committee. I don't believe that you would weaponize my religious beliefs. I don't believe that you would criticize me because I choose to teach Sunday school in my church, and to somehow say that because I'm a Sunday school, because I'm a Christian, that me being a part of this hearing somehow, in some way, flies in the face of my religious beliefs. Because what we're doing here today is we are not casting a broad net on every non-governmental organization, every nonprofit. We are instead focusing this hearing on those who have profited off of the illegal immigration that we saw under the Biden-Harris administration. I have mentioned nothing in my statement about nonprofits such as Red Cross, Catholic Charities, Samaritan's Purse, Doctors Without Borders, nonprofits who actually take money and use it for the good, who are out there collecting money from their congregation, from members of the community who wish to give back. Instead, this hearing is focused on those handful of nonprofits who received their money almost exclusively from grants from the federal government, but yet still claim to be nonprofits. Ms. Hopper, you mentioned two of those in your written testimony, two that I referenced in my opening statement, those two being Endeavors, who, according to my information that I received, Endeavors received 97% of their funding from federal or local grants. They weren't out raising money. They weren't out there ringing the bell there at Christmas asking people to give money. They weren't in churches asking members of the congregation to please give to these organizations. They were instead an arm of the federal government in that they received 97% of their funding. And then Southwest Key Properties was an NGO that blew past that. 99% of their funding came from grants from the federal government. And what did these organizations do with that? You talk about in your testimony, Ms. Hopper, you talk about Endeavor, that in 2020, Endeavor reported $52 million in revenue. That in 2021, they reported $658 million in revenue. A $600 million increase in a year, with 97% of that money coming from the federal government. And that in 2022, they reported a record $1.18 billion from the federal government, or at least 97% of that. You talk about how executives for Endeavor padded their pockets, that with this increase in revenue comes increase in salary, that the compensation for the CEO doubled. You talk about these particular CEOs that I mentioned, instead of using that money to protect children, they were treating this money like venture capitalists. You also stated in there that an Endeavor's individual, someone within their organization, said that the border crisis was a boom for business. In an article from the New York Post, they talk about another one of these nonprofits. They talk about Southwest Key. The headline says, Texas nonprofit housing migrant kids took $3 billion in grants from Biden administration and boosted executive salaries up to 139% to pull the plug. And so I am offended when people from the other side say that we're not being Christian, that we don't want to help people. We're not saying that all nonprofits are bad. Many of us support and give money and volunteer to those. But this hearing today is focused on those nonprofits which were government funded, which were used by the Biden-Harris administration to continue to move people across the border against the will of the public and without the authorization of Congress. So with that, I yield back, and I now recognize my friend from California, Mr. Carrera, for 5 minutes for his questioning of the witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do hope to continue to work